This is slide 7 of our westward expansion unit on the farmer's frontier. We said there are 3 big reasons that the white settlers wanted land in the west: mining, cattle, and now their third one is farming. Okay? This one involved the biggest numbers of people in terms of those 3 different occupations. More farmers than anything else. Okay? And one of the reasons is that the government was begging you to be a farmer, so much so they were willing to give you land to do it. And that was through something called the Homestead Act, passed in 1862. There you see the stamp up top here, the commemorative 100-year stamp. 1862, the Homestead Act gave away 160 acres of land to anyone who was willing to farm that land for 5 years. So you had to live on it and farm it for 5 years and improve it, which simply meant just building a house on it. So if you farmed it and lived on that land in a house for 5 years, at the end of the 5 years, that land was yours outright. You could keep it and continue farming it. You could sell it and keep whatever money you could get for it, whatever you wanted to do. But the government will give you 160 acres of land. They're begging people to come west and settle. Now, to give you some idea of how big that is, what size we're talking about, the land that Trinity sits on there in St. Matthews, bounded by Westport Road in the back there, and Shelbyville, and St. Matthews Avenue, and Sharon Avenue, right there. That land is about 15 acres. So if you could imagine almost 11 Trinities, that amount of land, it was about 160 acres. And each family, head of a family, could claim land through the Homestead Act. Right? A lot of people did. Right? In the first 40 years that the Homestead Act was in effect, about 500,000 families received free land. 500,000. But there is a catch here. Oftentimes it was better to buy land. You could buy land for about $1.25 an acre. And oftentimes it's better to do that than take the homestead land, because the catch is the homestead land is not the greatest land. Oftentimes it wasn't near a water source. It was very difficult to farm. So if you're going to farm it, you're really going to work at it. Drought forced perhaps as many as 2 out of every 3 homesteaders to give up before their 5 years had expired here. So 2 out of every 3 gave up and left before they owned the land. So there is a catch. They're going to give you land, but they're not giving away the best land. They're selling that. Right? The biggest problem that that farmers have here is the climate. Right? There's nothing you can do about it. Right? And if you'll remind me, I'll show you on the big awesome map where I'm talking about here. But there is a 100th meridian. Right? Meridians kind of run north-south on a map. A 100th meridian that separates really kind of 2 climate zones. East of that line, most of the Great Plains got plenty of rain. Plenty of rainfall. Rivers stayed full. Farmers got the rain they needed. West of that 100th meridian, it was very risky farming because they didn't get a lot of rain. It's in the shadow, it's what's called the rain shadow of the Rocky Mountains. So farming west of that line was very risky, and that's where most of the homestead land was. So climate's a big problem, not a lot you can do about it. Okay? Now, one thing you can do is kind of change how you farm. Okay? Farmers would practice something called dry farming. Up here there's a book, Soil Water Conservation and Dry Farming. It basically meant keeping your land plowed so that when it did rain, all that rain could soak into the ground. If you don't have your land plowed, then the rain just runs off. So dry farming, you had to constantly plow your land so that it's ready to receive any of the rain. They practiced crop rotations, letting fields kind of lie fallow every other year so the nutrients could replenish themselves. Certain types of crops take less water than others. Winter wheat. It was wheat imported from Russia. The climate in Russia is not real hospitable, but they grow a lot of wheat. And how is that they're growing a different type of wheat than we were here. So they would grow what's called winter wheat. It didn't require as much water. It was a lot hardier. It could withstand more temperature extremes. Winter wheat was helpful. They stopped growing a lot of corn in the western part of the plains because corn takes a lot of water. There are ways around it, but bottom line, you're going to have to depend on Mother Nature's help here if you're going to be a farmer. Now, we said on the last slide, a lot of women headed west because they had opportunities available to them there that they didn't anywhere else. Same was true with farming. Women could claim land under the Homestead Act. If the woman was the head of the household, her husband had died or was gone, whatever, women could claim the land for the family. And in a lot of cases they did. Women's work on the plains was considered anything that needed done. Okay, women's work, in stereotypical times here, was seen as cooking, cleaning, caring for children, and all that. That's not the way it was in the West. If it needed done and a woman could do it, then she did it. There was no such thing as, I don't do that, that's my husband's job. No, if it needed done, she could do it, then they did it. So women's work was anything that needed to get done. And women became very self-sufficient in the West. Now, we also mentioned when we were talking about the ranchers and the cattle that there's very little wood on the plains. So if you don't have a lot of wood, you have to find creative solutions to your problems. We have already mentioned the solution to the fence problem. There at the bottom you see the barbed wire. You still need a wooden post to connect the wires to, but you don't need the wooden planks connecting each post. You connect them with the wires here, the barbed wire. Served a couple of purposes. One, it was cheap. It was easy to make barbed wire fences on the plains because, again, you don't need a lot of wood. And it kept the cattle out. It kept the ranchers' cattle out of your farm from destroying your crops. So when Joseph Glidden invents barbed wire, it is a huge help to the farmers on the plains. Without that, they couldn't fence off their land and cattle destroyed it. Okay? Another problem is fuel. Most places you burn wood for a fire, but you don't have enough wood on the plains. You don't have much of anything that'll burn. Grass will burn, but it burns very, very quickly. 2 seconds, your fire's gone. You need something that burns slowly. So if you don't have a lot of wood on the plain, you need to burn something that you do have a lot of. And something that you have a lot of is poop. They're called buffalo chips. Early on, Plains Indians figured this out, that they would walk around and pick up dried buffalo poo. Okay? Here you see a picture. A woman pushing a wheelbarrow full of buffalo chips. There is a pile. That is a massive pile of poo there. Buffalo chips. Those are all cow patties or buffalo patties there. What happens is cattle or buffalo or any type of large animal wanders around. They eat the grass. They poop. Okay. Now, what happens to that poop is out in the sun of the plains, the sun bakes it, dries it, so you get a big tall pile of poop. As it dries, it flattens and spreads out. And when it dries, it hardens. So you can pick it up. It's hard. You can break it in half like you would a piece of wood. It burns just like wood. Now, you're sitting here thinking, oh, my God, that's gross. I'm not throwing poop on my fire. It'll stink. No, it doesn't, actually. When the sun bakes this poo and hardens it, it kills the bacteria inside it. So there is nothing left to stink. It burns literally just like wood. There you see, it's called prairie firewood, or over here, buffalo chips, or Kansas coal, because coal burns but you don't have coal on the plains. You get coal in mountains. So it had a lot of nicknames. Buffalo chips were the most common one. But you walk around, you pick it up, it's hard, snap it in half, throw it on the fire, burns just like wood. It's a creative solution to a big problem. You need fuel, burn what you got a lot of. Right? The last thing you also need, in addition to fencing, which you need to fix, you need a creative solution for. You'd have fuel, you need a creative solution for. You also have housing that you're now going to need a creative solution for. If you don't have wood to build a house, you use what you do have a lot of, and that was dirt. They were called sod houses. Now, sod is simply just grass and dirt. Okay? You take some wood that you had, and you build forms like to shape bricks, and you take dirt and you throw in some grass to give it some consistency. You mix it with water, and you get a muddy, gooey, goopy substance. You put that in these little forms, rectangular forms, set it in the sun, let the sun bake it, and suddenly you have a brick made out of sod, made out of dirt. Right? And you would use those bricks then to build your house. Now at the bottom of the picture here, there you see a sod house. Right? Those are bricks, sod bricks. You take the bricks, you use mud as mortar in between them, slap the bricks together, let the mud harden, you get a nice brick wall. If you build your house into the side of a hill, as you've done here, the hillside becomes your back wall of the house. So that's one less wall you have to build. Now, that does lead to a problem, such as cows walking out onto your roof. You see the picture there. Yes, that is a cow standing on the roof of a house. The cow has wandered down the hillside and out onto the roof. It is what it is. You know, it works. Sod houses are extremely efficient. Earth is a good insulator, right? So in the summer, your sod house stayed nice and cool. In the winter, you have a stove inside to cook on. That heats the house and it stays nice and warm. It's a great solution. Now this would have been a pretty fancy sod house because, as you see there, it's got 2 windows. It was a very big deal. 1 and 2 there. It was a big deal to have windows in your house. You didn't want a lot though, because it lets sun in, which heats up your house in the summer there. But windows were very expensive because the nearest glass is in the east, the big cities of the east. It's very expensive to ship glass across the continent here to the Great Plains to put into a house. So this house that has two windows is a pretty fancy house there. You see everybody posing. But sod houses, very good, very efficient, another creative solution to a problem. So the farmers have to find ways to deal with the problems that they are experiencing.